Grief is a normal human thing. Grief actually is what gives life so much meaning. We grieve because we love. And as they say, tongue in cheek, nobody gets out of this alive. And if we had all the time in the world, time would be way less valuable. And it is the fact that our physical presence on this temporal land at some point will come to an end. And however you spiritually explore and move into relationship with your mind-body system, that doesn't necessarily mean your life comes to an end, but our footprints here will. And so, as we'll be talking about, grief is very normal and deeply painful. As meaning-making creatures, we do like to assign blame to ourselves for things that are not our fault, in large part because if we feel like we could have done something different, this might sound interesting. It gives our amygdala a sense of control, which calms her down. Like, oh, sweet baby girl. It keeps us stuck. I like to think of grief as being an experience that softens as it becomes integrated. And because we have loved and cared, our brain remembers it. Our amygdala is involved in all of it. That doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. And the MRIs, as we'll talk about, actually show that those moments of grief, those waves, are not an unusual amount of amygdala activation. It's healthy. It's facilitative processing. Before we dig in really deep, I just want to throw this slide up here and have all of us hold space for the fact that while we so often think about grief, life, death, our own sweet little minds and bodies can experience any of these types of grief tied to any type of loss. Dr. Ron Rudin, Dr. Viktor Frankl, many, many, many moons ago, 7 years ago, talks about meaning making. Dr. David Kessler, meaning making. Anything that we have meaning around that we lose can result in deep, painful grief. I want to invite you to hold space for yourself that all of these types of losses can be just as big, powerful, and deeply meaningful, and therefore just as impactful on functioning and result in all of the different types of symptoms that arise. Because grief is very multidimensional. There's the cognitive aspects, the body aspects, the emotions, the physical manifestations. Grief brain is very, very real. Our brain stops functioning. We can't think. We can't pay attention. And in large part, that's a normal, expected part of grief because the rest of our brain and our body is processing through and trying to make sense of the nonsensical. So it makes sense that our thinking brain's going, I just don't have enough energy up here. Because our primal systems are trying to integrate and make sense. Grief has huge social impact. People in our world after grief sometimes disappear. We get ghosted. That happened to me in some pretty unexpected and big ways. The people we thought we could rely on. It's their own amygdala. It's not personal, but man, does it ever feel personal in the moment. And then, of course, there's spiritual and existential aspects. What does this mean that somebody can be here today and gone tomorrow? That something can be here today and gone tomorrow? How do we reconcile that loss and help our mind-body system come together? So way, way, way back in the day, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was working in hospice. And in her last book that she wrote with Dr. David Kessler, she talks about this, how one of her great regrets is that her work was applied in a way that it wasn't meant to be. Because when we're in grief, there's no stages. We feel all these things, sometimes all at once. And we see that when we look at the neuroscience. We can get stuck in different areas and we can have so many more experiences than just these stages. It is so messy. And yet, as humans, we want to have stages because we like to know that there's structure. We like to go, I go here, I go here, I go here, I go here, and I'm done. I have done the work. I am cool. Okay. And yet when we don't follow those sequences of steps, there can be so much shame and despair and a deeply rooted sense of there's something wrong with my grieving journey. There is no right way to grieve. It's messy, and that mess is so uncomfortable for us. We are bad at mess as humans.